Shalom, shalom. This is your gal checking in. I was supposed to do a live on this topic a little while ago, and I guess I've just been a little bit busy, not so busy, but getting things together. But we were going to talk about the 10 lost tribes, you guys. This has been a topic that comes up for debate, lots and lots and lots of times, you guys. So there's a lot of different information on this and a lot of, investigation. But let's just kind of mill the facts around in our head so that we can kind of get a good feel for what might be going on. And I want to also use the map too. I'm doing this live because, you know, I don't really have the honest answer is that we don't know, that we only have is we don't have any solid evidence of any particular group of people or tribe that best fits all the characteristics of Israel. But we do have some speculation. While we know that Judah was scattered to the four corners, you guys, I'm just getting this ready for you guys. Thank you, daughter. We know that Judah was scattered to the four corners, and we know when, right? We know just about when, and we know that it's been repeated, but we know when. Starting at 70 AD, Judah began to be scattered to the four corners. But what about Israel? What about the 10 northern tribes? What about that group that was scattered a full 150 years before the southern tribe? And then not only that, 700 and, well, a full 800 years before the temple was destroyed. So I mean that's a big deal to have a people that are scattered 800 years before their brothers and sisters in the south. So there's a lot of different conjecture and different directions that people say that the 12 tribes, but let's go historically and try to identify some of the people and some of the places where they are. Because we run into a topic that is of utmost importance because we have another group in one of the places that they begin to be scattered to. So let's just go over it. Let's start with the very earliest where the Israelites went, the northern Israelites went. So the earliest reference we have is, of course, in the book of the Kings when it says that the northern tribes were scattered beyond Babylon to not necessarily Assyria, but into Persia. But, they were, so this is what happened. The northern Israelite tribes were sent into captivity and they were scattered. Some of them in Assyria, because this is the nation that conquered them. It's either Sennacherib or Shalmaneser that was the one that actually conquered them and sent them into Assyria and then also into Persia. But in our reference, it would be beyond Babylon. In our mind is beyond Babylon. And then you also have the most populous tribe, Ephraim, which, and then since Ephraim is the most populous, you also have the rest of northern tribe that, the other 10 tribes that are called Ephraim together. So you have literally the northern kingdom going by the nickname Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. I'll be in there in a minute. Until then, have Jackson check you, which means fruitfulness. Ephraim means fruitfulness, right? And that's what we see is that Ephraim is fruitful. And so there is a prophecy that the Gentiles, that Ephraim would be the fullness of the Gentiles, that the scattering of Ephraim would, when they come back, it'd be like a net, it'd be like a fishing net, so that when you throw the net out onto the water, do you see what I'm saying? The net stays in the water until it gathers in its clutches, you could say, the right amount of fish. And then when that right amount of fish is there, then you pull the net back into the boat. This is really what Ephraim and Judah scattering. This is really what the scattering of Israel represents, is the fullness of the Gentiles. We're actually associated with a congregation here that's called the fullness of the Gentiles. And what that means is just when Israel is brought all back in, like a net, they will bring in with them, many, many fish that coming back into the fold, being put back into their own tree, graft back into their own tree. Go ahead and check your work with Jackson. It should be very easy. You have a short one. And then you guys will take a quick break and then we'll go outside. So the bringing of them back in is basically the fullness of the Gentiles, that the amount of Gentiles that are going to be saved will be saved when Ephraim is brought back in. They will be the challenge. Okay, I'll be out there in a minute. You guys take a break. If everybody's done, you guys take a break. I'll be out there in a minute. Take a break. I'll be out there in a minute. So this is the concept of Israel going out and being scattered and then brought back in. But the problem is the northern 10 tribes have disappeared into history. So originally they were sent out into Persia, into Assyria, and beyond Babylon. And Persia is beyond Babylon. So we know this. The reason is because and then here's another aspect. Before we get into that, we're going to talk about another concept here. When Nehemiah and Ezra were coming back from being captives in the Persian Empire, and this is about 75, 80 or so years after the original Judean captivity of 586. So we'll just put it at around 500, right? We can put the return at around 500 BC for the southern kingdom of Judah to come to Israel, based off of Ezra and Nehemiah. We know that the Persian king saw to have favor on Nehemiah and began to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. And we know that there was lots of turmoil in building that wall and rebuilding the temple and rededicating the temple and all those different things. We know this is Nehemiah, Ezra, Zechariah, Malachi. Those prophets were around that time. Haggai, all those prophets were in the same time period. But when they came back, maybe people know this, maybe people don't. They sent letters out. To the northern tribes, which were beyond, hey, what's up? Which were beyond Babylon, and called for them, since they were at that time still a functioning nation and still, Israelite. I believe it was Ezra that sent out the letter to those northern tribes, and Ezra managed to convince them with this renewing of the temple and regathering, convinced them to come down and join into Judah. And now this isn't everybody, because by this time, this is 500 BC, the Israelites out of Israel, out of Judah, out of the whole nation of Israel by this time it would have been 220 years, because we estimate around 720, 722 that the northern kingdom went into captivity. But after that, after the return happens in around 500 BC, of course, like we're saying, Ezra called those northern tribal members back, and that would have been around 220, 222 years later. So not everybody is keen to give up the place that they've lived now for like 4 or 5 generations, being in that area. You could say, I suppose, about 5 generations, being outside of Israel. But some did. You had a good amount of people that did, and we don't know how many or anything like that, but we have a good amount of people that come back. We know that this is the case, and we know that they did well in Israel or in Judah because in the New Testament, in the book of Luke, do you remember the woman that, and what was her name? Was her name Elizabeth? I know there's another Elizabeth, Zachariah's wife, but in the temple, and I can look this up. This is in Luke chapter 2, I believe. Let's look it up now. It's in Luke chapter 2. And this is something that people want to consider too, because there was a miniature regathering in the time of Nehemiah Ezra that does need to be accounted for, just like it says that there would be one kingdom. That partially happened in the in the 6th century BC. So let's take a look here. I hope you guys can hear me. There's nobody on here right now, but for posterity's sake. So yeah, this is in chapter 2. Anna, her name was Anna. It says in Luke chapter 2, verse 36, it says, and there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was a Hello, are you guys there? It I got a phone call, so it kind of melted me out there. Can you still? Let's see. Uh-oh, can I pause that bad boy? It says that it's still going, but you can't see my face. It's telling me, do I wanna? You see what I'm saying? So it still got me on here, but I don't know if you can see my face or not. I'm trying to get it to where that you can see what's going on, but I can't. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I see that there's one person on here. If you can hear me, just throw a 1 into the chat or say I can hear you. If you can't hear me or if you can't see me, okay, shalom, shalom. That's all I was looking to see. Shalom, shalom, brother. How are you doing? So if you can hear me, uh, okay, shalom, shalom. Open up the scroll. You here too. So if you guys can hear me, we'll get back started here. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I can't see. That's my wife in there. I can't see. Yeah, this the boys. We're finished. We're in the middle of homeschool, but I wanted to get to this. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Do I need to start this over again? Because I've had some of it. I got a phone call and it messed everything up. Okay, okay. Is it on my face? Because I can't see if it's on my face. I don't want it to be on my basket of laundry over there. Shalom, shalom. I hope you guys are good. It looks like you guys can see me and hear me. Okay, so we're talking about the 12, or we're talking about the 10 northern tribes, and we're just going any information at all, throw it in there. Let's discuss it and see what we can come up with. Because I have a speculative idea on who the children are and where they are and how. Okay, cool, and how they got to be where I believe that they are. Let's continue to talk about it because again, we may be wrong here. We might be wrong. So we started talking about the 10 tribes to the north, and those 10 tribes being sent off into captivity beyond Babylon in 722 by the king of Assyria. It's either Sennacherib or Shalmaneser. I can't remember which one. But when my wife is going crazy in there. She, baby, I'm on live here. They can hear you. Just dropped on your face. What is the topic? Can you? The topic is the 10 northern tribes of Israel. We're going to try to see if we can identify who they are and where they are. So let's just take a look here. So we know that the 10 northern tribes got sent off into the land of Persia and the land of Assyria. So what they did was they switched out people that they were calling Cuthians. This is who Josephus describes these people that they switched out with as Cuthians. And so these Cuthians are Persians in nature, that they're Persian style people that come from what we think of as Persia, Media Persia. So we're not thinking of people, and then this is in the 700s. So when we look at the Persians in the 700s, we know them to be a very dark skinned people. Now, I don't know if this is correct or not, but we know that when the Magog tribes began to sweep south, we know that eventually Persia was defeated by Alexander the Great. But Alexander the Great didn't look to slaughter the Persians. He just wanted to be a Darius king. He just wanted to be in charge of Persia. That was his goal, was to conquer the greatest nation, which is Persia. That's not the goal of the Magog tribes. The Seljuks and all those people that came down, the Huns that eventually came down, the very, very early tribes, the Gok Turks and all of those different people that were coming down originally, those people were the ones that actually wanted to really destroy and rebuild in their own image. The scripture says that that last feet and toes kingdom will try men, but they will not cleave one to another. So that's what they tried to do. They tried to really wipe out the Persians and then any nation that they would come across. So, what I think, and this is just me here, I think that the Persians fled southeast, and I've got my map up here, and I want to show you guys the map. I don't know if you can see me, hear me, or what, but just dropped on your face. What is the topic? Okay, I surely hope that is that you can see what's going on. So I hope you guys can see the map right now. If you guys can't see the map, I don't know if you can see a map or not. I'm not sure. Hopefully you guys aren't looking at my laundry basket here, but I'll just go for the map and we'll just put it on there. So what they did, and this is me, I believe that I don't know what's going on in there. I believe that the Magogites coming out of Russia, coming out of the Eurasian steppe, swooped down through the Caucasus Mountains and actually pushed, and then all the way to the other side as well, and actually pushed the original Persians south and southeast into India and deeper down into India. I think the southern Indians, because remember, the northern Indians are Magog as well. This is where you get the caste system in India, that the Magogites at a very the Aryans came down at a very early stage in India's history and established this caste system with the much darker Indians moving south. I believe those are the original Persians. I may be wrong about that, but the depictions of ancient Persians and modern Indians, whether you get the dark skinned Indians, are very, very, very similar, you guys. And so let's just, back up a little bit and recognize that there was something that happened in the land of Persia between I guess you could say 700 BC when we have the depictions of the Persians, and 700 AD when you have the modern style Persians and the Arabs and all of these different tribes of people that look to be lighter skinned. This is where we get that concept from, of the lighter skinned Persian, from the we can't even say the Medes either. We know Madai is a son of Japheth too. We don't recognize all Japhet as being white-skinned people, just this particular group of Magogites that are white-skinned. So when we look at some of the sons of Japheth, we say white because Madai and Persians, but they were different. They were different people groups. In fact, the ancient Persians were more Elamites. Do you see what I'm saying? They were Elam. You have Elam, and then you have Media that made twin nations together. And so it wouldn't be too far different in appearance either. And that's a coincidence because you've got two different sons of them there. So this is where, okay, cool. That is exactly what I'm looking for. That's the information that I need. Because some of this stuff is conjecture because you're just looking at the map, you're looking at the historical places and times and figures and where these people groups moved. And that makes sense that they would have been all the way down in India and then pushed down. But that information gives me, you know, more. You're talking about the 127 provinces. Okay, shalom, shalom. You're talking about the 127 provinces that the Persian Empire ruled over, going all the way down. I do remember that. But as far as being modern Indians, I would need some more information to say that they were pushed and remained south. We know that Mark, the disciple, traveled into India. Was it Mark that was in India, or was it Thomas? It may have been Thomas went into India because there was a large group of Israelites in India at that time, which at that time it was known as Ethiopia because of the kingdom of Axum. Was it Axum, the Axumite kingdom that stretched across into India? That they also called them Ethiopian. Actually, goes into India and is stoned in India for preaching the word of Mashiach. So, okay, that's not what we're talking about. We're gonna get it says okay. So we'll get backed up here if we don't get on subject. There's a lot of information here. So the original Persians being sent south makes sense because you do have a group of people that are coming from Israel at around that time and living in Persian lands, and Persians going into Israel and making up the majority of the people in northern Israel, of Israelites in the land of northern Israel, and the future Samaritans, which would have been the Parthians and the Cuthians that they moved into Israel. They would make up the Samaritans later on. What's up? For okay, okay. Do you know where the wallet is? Yeah, it is. It is. But so you have at that time. She busted her head. I know. You have at that time. I'm going. This is why I usually don't live during the day because I'm really pretty busy with the kids during the day. A mixture of Israelites and Persians, mostly Persian. We know that it's mostly Persian because a couple generations later, when Nehemiah, Ezra are rebuilding the wall, and the Samaritans by this time are coming down and asking if they can help rebuild the temple. They say absolutely not, but you can, worship in the temple in the courtyard where the Gentiles are. We know that Ezra and Nehemiah did not accept the Samaritans as Israelites take part in the rebuilding of the temple. That's how we know that they were mostly Gentile, if not fully Gentile, by that time. So where did the Israelites go? They went into what is modern day Iran, into Persia, and into that area. They say Assyria, this in the north, Assyria is in further in the north, but it's Persia that they were kind of traded. The Cuthians and the Parthians in Persia were switched with the Israelites. And so this is how we know this because says that the northern tribes of Israel were a great multitude beyond Euphrates. And we know that the Euphrates River is in Iraq. And what is beyond Iraq, what is beyond Babylon, Persia is further to the east. So we recognize that that area of Persia is where the Israelites were and were a great multitude at one time. Did you watch the video about Thailand that I sent, the people group called Nature Yao? Yes, I did. I saw that. I saw that when he said, what is, he was looking at a tree. He was like, what is this? And she said, Yao. And, and he said, the tree is called Yao? And she said, no. And she pointed up and she said, Yao. Or is it he or she was an older person? And they said, Yao. And he said, oh, okay, well, and I guess he assumed it was nature, but it looked like that she was saying that the deity that is in control of nature, or that the tree along with the deity, and these are black folks that are from Thailand, that are indigenous in Thailand, which is amazing because this is where we're headed here. That these tribes of people, that you have black tribes of people in every single country. You have the indigenous original population. It may not even be the original population. It just may be an older group that was there. And so when we look at this and we look at these people in these different places like Thailand, like Iran, if you've seen, there have been some videos that come out recently, with this conflict that's going on about the Afro-Iranians, that there's a large population of Afro-Iranians that are supposedly from the slave and actual Persians or Israelites, or they could be Israelites themselves, you guys. Because there's Afro-Iraqis, Afro-Arabs, all of these different nations from places where we don't assume there to be black people. There are black people. And this is literally what prophecies, pockets of us in all nations, pockets of people that are on the bottom while another group of people are at the top. And whether it be in India, whether it be Iran, whether it be in Thailand, that there is this partition between the people groups, that at the bottom you will have the darker skin, which has always been associated with Africa, which should more correctly be associated, because of the places where they are, with Israel, right? With the scattered northern tribes. But we're gonna look at this. We're gonna delve into it. And so, my brother Israelite in Panama, we're having a discussion about where the northern Israelites are. He suggested, from some of the information that he's gathered, is that the northern Israelites must have been this group of people who are associated with the Caucasus Mountains. And I can't remember the name of the group of people, but he was looking at them as Rodanites or Radanites. But those Radanites closely match up with a tribe of Javan called the Rodanites, or the Dodanim. So I'm not sure if those are the people, but the area is correct. So when you start to get into the ages, the interbiblical ages, the 400, Malachi to Matthew, 400 to 0. When you start to get into that time period, this is the time period that Josephus is speaking of, because Josephus is speaking from the 1st century AD. So he's talking about the people that have been in these areas for a long time. And Josephus says that the 10 tribes, and I trust Josephus's understanding of the very much. We watch Josephus's interpretation very closely. So what he says is that the 10 tribes are a great multitude beyond Euphrates. And so the nation that is beyond Euphrates is Persia, is Iran. So what we're looking at is that Iran is one of the places. Okay, great, because we're talking about your interpretation of the 10 tribes right now. So one of the places where there was a gathering, and a long time gathering, of the children of Israel is ancient Persia beyond Babylon, which in this intertestamental time period between 400 and 100 AD, you're talking about this being for sure the land of Gog and Magog. You're literally looking at Iran being northern Iran being between the Caspian and the Black Sea, south of the Caucasus Mountains, where at this point in time, you have the escape of the Magogites and the Magogite tribes at the very beginning. They're beginning at this time to populate Armenia, Turkey, or all these northern places, and then flood into Iran. If you look at an older map of Iran, you run into two nations. You run into these, Magogite kingdoms to the west, but you have these other two nations, the Colchis and the Iberians, a nation that was south of the Caucasus Mountains called, and this is in the Iran, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia area. This place was called Iberia. And if that name sounds familiar to you, Iberia is also the place that they call, another name for Spain is Iberia. And so why would Spain be called Iberia? Why would this place in the Caucasus, south of the Caucasus, south and to the west of the Caucasus, to the east, south and to the east of the Caucasus, be called um, uh, Iberia? Why? Because they had Hebrews there, because the name Eber is actually Hebrew. So whenever you look at anything Iberia, you want to associate it with Hebrew, right? So the problem with that is that this puts a huge tribe of Israel smack dab in the center of Gog Magog. Do you see what I'm saying? Right at the time when Gog Magog would have been at their most, or their they would be gathering up to their most dangerous point. They would have been earning the reputation. Do you see what I'm saying? They would have been in the mix with these Magog tribes. But at this time, you have to recognize, at this time, the Magog tribes were literally the worst people, the the most violent and vicious barbarians on the face of the planet. You're talking about people that didn't bathe at all, that didn't have houses, that didn't have any, you know, kings, didn't have any, they don't develop kings until the time of Attila. Before then, they weren't even known for having kings. They were just known for having, tribal leaders who would lead in war. And if they were successful, they would lead over the people. Anytime that they would see any hint of weakness, they would kill him. And they had no regal anything, no dynasties, no writing, no fixed housing. They lived in wagons, no nothing at this point. And they were such a violent people that nobody, even other Magogite groups, did not want to be around the most violent of these people. My sons are outside, just all sorts of noise, trying to keep them down out there. But so that means that there's in your mind that there's a possibility that the Magog tribes and the Hebrew 10 tribes mixed, or that they somehow became one nation or called by the same name. So that's where I have to draw the line, because I don't think that's what happened. I think the Magogites at that time were such a vicious group of people that they did not cleave with the Iberians that were there. So we have another, uh, and so I say witness here. We have another witness to this because of some racial components. And it'll sound, I always make this disclaimer that I'm, not bigoted and I hate to sound racial, but we do have to use some racial characteristics to identify the people that we're dealing with, right? We know that the Magogite tribes that were coming out of the Caucasus Mountains were lighter skinned. Not all of them were lighter skinned, were. So we also know that the Israelites were dark skinned. Not everybody was all the way black. We know that we have from in the nation, we have light skin to dark skin. We know that what? Whose father was named Cushi? Was it Zephaniah? Was it Zephaniah, son of Cushi? One of the prophets' fathers was named Cushi, which means black. We know that Laban, even Laban was called means white. So you have in the family, you know, range of what the Hebrews would look like. You have from light skinned people, which you would term as yellow. Josephus considers it yellow. My wife is light skinned, red bone, yellow bone, to dark skin, which also is Cushite like. Do you understand what I mean? Cush was the darkest person on the planet. The Cushites were the most black people. In that range, in Israel, you had going from that dark to that light. Not white skin, lack of melanin white, but yellow complected, like a yellow bone or a red bone. We always assume that our light skinned people come from mixtures of white people. And that is the case with some. But, light skin in itself or mid skin doesn't always mean white heritage. Do you see what I'm saying? So we know that Israel has that range of complexion anyway. So, with that being said, the majority are in that mid skin to dark skin range, just like today. So, in Iran, in this area that is southeast of the Caucasus, you have a problem. You have Magog, who were barbarian, Viking-ish people, and then you have Israel or Iberia, who were described, this is what I was getting to, described by Tacitus as being dark-skinned. That the Iberians there, and here's the thing, you guys, he doesn't say the Iberians, he says the Colchis. And so the Colchis and the Iberians were sister cities. They were twin nations that existed one with the other in that intertestamental time period, going all the way up to beyond the time of Josephus when they disappeared. Do you see what I'm saying? So the Colchis is Colchis. And we have some people that are called Colchis today with some weird racial characteristics. It says speckled bird. Absolutely. There you go. This is the prophecy concerning Ephraim. But here we are with in this intertestamental early modern age time when you have Magog and we were talking about culture described by Tacitus to look like, and this is a direct quote, to look like Egyptians, Jews, and Ethiopians. And so here we get the depiction of what Israel looked like, of what the Jews looked like in the first century AD. Tacitus is a first century Roman ex-general historian who described all the people groups around them that he knew and recognized and could identify in history. But since he was a Roman, his history didn't as far as the Jews or as far as the Ethiopians. So when he saw this group of people, that they all looked like one another, which means that they had dark skin, curly hair, and then, distinct noses, he said that these groups of people must have emerged one from another, with the Ethiopians being the oldest because their religion goes back the furthest. He literally says these words, that the Jews must be Egyptians and that the Egyptians must be Ethiopians because of the way that they look. Goes on to say, we can't only use that as this racial component as a characteristic because there's another group of people that look exactly like them that do not live in the desert area but live up north, south of the Caucasus Mountains, that are called the Colchis. And those people have wide noses, black skin, and curly hair, just like the Ethiopians. And so when I originally heard that back in the day, when I'm reading Tacitus and this is the same place where they said that, where scripture and history tells us that the 10 northern tribes are. So who are these Cochise people? So I start to look at them a lot closer. Turns out that they are on the west side of a nation called Iberia. And that, we talked about Iberia, that Iberia is Hebrew, is literally Eber land, land of Eber. Iberia means land of Eber. And that same denomination is given to Spain. So Spain is Iberia too. Why? Because we know that there was a gang of Israelites in Spain, so much so that Paul wanted to visit Spain. Paul wanted to visit, after his captivity, was wanting to visit Spain. And so we think, with Acts 29, that that's what he actually did, was go on to visit Spain and even go beyond that to go and visit England. And this is where we have some other, this goes into a whole other thing about how the English think that they're the 10 lost tribes and they're actually Magogites. But again, that's a whole other subject. So we're dealing with the Colchis and the being there next to the Caucasus, and then also in Spain, and then also being associated with a group called the Cochise, who Tacitus then describes as being a black tribe of people that live in the far north, in Iceland, the lands you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be black curly-haired people, places now where there are white people. You got start to make this connection. Okay, there was this black group of people up there where the Magogites were. And do I think that they mixed with the Magogites? I do not think so. I think based off of what Second Esdras says, based off of what the prophecy, I think it's Second Esdras 13 or so, based off the prophecy of Azareth. We were talking about the nation or the land of Azareth in the chat or in the comments in another video. Me and Israelite in Panama. We were talking about the nation of Azareth as being a nation that had not been populated yet, and that was across. Now it was the rivers of Assyria that they were able to cross on dry land, which I believe is also the river and a couple of other rivers, but they were able to cross those places on dry land as a miracle to literally run from the Gentiles that were in that area. I think that 2nd Esdras 13 is talking about the twin nations that were called by the Romans Iberia and Colchis. I think that once the Magogites start coming out in force in the Caucasus Mountains, they realized that they could not stay in that area. And instead of going back down south deeper into what would have been Iran, what would be Iran now, but would have been Persia and lands of Magog then, them underneath into the east of the Caucasus. So we know that they would have spread deeper into China, Mongolia, and all those other places. Maybe, just maybe, would have went further north or further northeast and tried to go deeper into uncharted territory, which would have been through Siberia, possibly through Alaska or some other land bridge to the north, come down through Canada and enter into the United States as Indians, as black-skinned tribes of Indians, which we do know existed. We know two things existed: that there was a slave trade, that people from West Africa were bought and brought into America and the Americas, all the way down into Panama and into South America and Brazil and all of these different places. And there were Indian tribes that were black tribes that were different from other tribes that were in the land. That there were two different types of people in America before the Spanish came, before the Portuguese came, before Columbus came. We know Columbus carried with him an interpreter, a Hebrew interpreter. We know there's depictions of the 12 tribes, high priest breast piece, and yeah, who were the two guys that went deep into the, I can't remember who they were, but they were the two guys, the twin group of people, but not take 1.5 years to do so. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about right here. That trip, that journey that took 1.5 years to complete. So, where else? Now, I want to ask this question because it says you read Ronald Sanders' book, Lost Tribes and Promised Lands. I have not. So, I haven't done a whole lot of specific research on the 10 tribes. I've followed mostly biblical, mostly prophetic, second Esdras, mostly in context like Josephus, and even a little bit of Talmudic stuff, because some of the Talmudic stuff says that the 10 tribes went into Africa. I don't necessarily believe that either. Looks like they went into the other direction, that they didn't go into Africa. So again, this is Ophir and some of these different places where I believe that this group, this large group of Israelites, went deep into the east, deep into the east, and splintered and dropped tribes everywhere they went, running from the Magogites. So 1.5 years is mentions supposed Native American speaking fluent Hebrew, but Hosea describes Ephraim. And any verses that you guys want me to look at or any consideration, for this interpretation, please let me know, because this is, what we're here for. This is why we get together and, midrash about these type of things, get to the root, dig deep about these things, because it's important to know. And so this is where, because a lot of people were confused on why were there black Hebrew-speaking tribes? Why were there Hebrew tribes at all? You've got a tribe of Indians called the Shoshani. The Shoshani, you guys. That's important for you to know, because Shoshani is Persia, the palace at Shushan. You understand that Shushan is the same name as Susan. That Susan is actually an ancient Shoshani Indian tribe, should not be called Shoshani whatsoever, because that word is a palace, is a city in Persia. This is where Daniel was. Wasn't he at the palace at Shushan? So Shushan literally is a Persian name. So you have a tribe of Indians that are called Shoshani, because this is my hypothesis here. I can't put any, scriptural or inspiration into it. This is research and being led by the Spirit. When I say no inspiration in it, we all have inspiration. We're here together. We all are inspired, but we have to look very, very closely at what we're doing so we don't get anything wrong. So I can't put a biblical stamp on this, but I can say that there is a lot of hint, a lot of clue, a lot of suggestion that says these Shoshani groups of Indians had to get that name from somewhere. They had to get it from somewhere. And it had to get it from somewhere before they were introduced to Western peoples, before they were introduced to Columbus and all of these different peoples, because Shoshani is an ancient name of these people. Why are these Indian groups called by a Persian name? I think that came out of Persia, that when they were in Iberia, when they were in Colchis, that a certain group of them called themselves the Shoshani, in a very similar fashion to the Pharisees. That term Pharisee means Persia. That Farsi and Pharisee are the same word. It means separated ones, but notice that out of the Persian captivity and out of the intertestamental period, you have this sect of Jews that, and I'm not saying that these are Persians, I'm saying that they're Persian styled Jews, Jews that were raised in, that believed some Persian things and that were influenced by Persian people and thought, and called themselves the set apart ones in a dual understanding, because the idea came from Persia and because they thought of themselves as being separated. That term Farsi or Persia means separate, it means divided, like mini tiku uparsin. Your kingdom has been, this is the message from Daniel on the wall. Daniel 5, Daniel 6, I think it's Daniel 5. But mini mini tiku uparsid. Okay, let's see what we got here. It says Shemites speak Hebrew too. Absolutely, that's absolutely all Shemites would have, and not only Shemites, but even some some other groups too. And that goes into another whole thing. But yeah, all style of Hebrew, whether it be Aramaic, whether it be Arabic, whether it be Ugarit, whether it be any of these different, you know, dialects of Hebrew, you're looking at a Semitic style of language, even on down into Egypt, because Egyptian, even ancient Egypt, has a Semitic feel to it. But what I'm saying is the whole point behind that is that we see some Persian remnants in Indian tribes which shouldn't be there. And there's one connection between Persia and North American Indians, and that would be if there was a land bridge crossed from the 10 northern tribes, making it, being sent to Persia by the Assyrian Empire, and then from Persia, running from the area through a land bridge, either in Alaska or somewhere else. Geography changes. We know that the Inuit people kind of did that same thing, which was cross land bridges to the north. I think that the land bridge was crossed and a large group of people, led by the Spirit, inhabited this new country called North America. I also think that some Magogites follow them there because there were some giants in the land. We know that there were giants in the land, and that the American Indians destroyed those giants. We know that Israelites know how to kill giants. We've been killing giants for a very long time. We know that the Edomites knew how to kill giants too, because they killed all the giants out of Mount Seir. So killing giants was something that Shemites did. Do you see what I'm saying? It's something that they knew how to do. So these are, I guess, potential evidences, or maybe even superficial evidences, but I think that this circumstantial evidence is fairly strong, because otherwise, how did we get in America? How are there, dark-skinned tribes? Do you now, take away the transatlantic slave trade? You can't take away the slave trade, even though with this information, I believe that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to muddy the waters between the two groups. But I do think that there was a remixing, 10 and the 3, and that they muddied the waters between the two by sending all the dark-skinned Indian tribes into slavery and all the lighter-skinned Indian tribes into the West to form their own places and there. I believe that there were 2 or 3 different tribes of North American Indians that came from possibly, Japheth and Shem, and were battling for the land of America before these Japhethites, these Magogites came and conquered later on. This is my hypothesis. And so, like Israelite in Panama is saying, the only problem with that is the length of time that it would have taken to get from Persia to North America. So if you were walking on foot, let's 8 hours a day, is there a route from one side of the world, and this is of course a flat world, from one side to the other? Do you see what I'm saying? That's the question. Let's see. Let's see. It says America first peopled by Shemites, first Indians, but not Israelites. It says, but today not as numerous as the sands. It says, but today not as numerous as the sands of the sea, Hosea prophecy, right? Okay, it's separated, one north, the other south, so no power. And so I can see that, I can understand that, but I have to recognize it historically. Do you see what I'm saying? And of course biblically. So in my interpretation of biblical understanding is that there were times when the northern and the southern tribes were brought together. One time is the time we talked about in Ezra, Nehemiah, but this other time could be another way to kind of get most of the Israelites, Judah and Ephraim, together washed at the same time. You know, there are scattered people in, I believe, Thailand, like brother is saying. There are scattered people in Brazil. There are scattered people in Central America. We know there are scattered people in the Middle East with the Afro-Iranians, the Afro-Iraqis. I was deployed to Iraq. I saw the Afro-Iraqis myself. I was blown out of the water in all of these far flung places, that there are the remnant or the residue in those places. But I believe that the large group may have been able to make it in a year and a half from one place to the other. And so when I started to look, and now look at this, you guys, I did make the journey. I kind of mapped the journey out walking from Tehran, and this is what I did. I went, if I'm not mistaken, I went from either Tehran or one of these places in the east. It says, could black Indians be a minority remnant of Ephraim? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to get at here. That this journey came, and because of this journey, this, you know, 1,000 years journey, we could actually be looking at of um, of Israel. So let's take a look at. Let's look at Tehran. We'll just use Tehran as the original spot. And I wish I could see what you guys are seeing, because I don't know if you guys can see my screen or not. So I'm just gonna go ahead here. Tehran. Let's see. To Alaska. And not even Alaska. I want to get all the way down into America. Do you see what I'm saying? I know Alaska's America, but you guys, the continental United States. So let's see if we were walking. Let's go to Seattle. Let's go from walking from Tehran to Seattle. How many? I did this. I did all the math because it's going to give me kilometers. Let's see. Walking. Sorry, we could not calculate walking directions from. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do Tehran to a place in the north here. Let's see. I definitely think that black Indians are Israelite people. You know, in our family, we always have somebody that say, "Oh, I'm part," but not recognizing that straight hair may not even be an Indian trait, that Israelites with curly hair in America as Indians is just as possible as the straight hair. I believe that those two are from two different tribes. And so maybe I did the kilometers. Maybe I just looked at it in kilometers, because it's not giving me, okay, let's do this. Let's do biking. Cycling not available, driving. Let's see, driving. Driving not available. Because I did all of this. It says Alaska was a part of Russia. Absolutely. And so this is why I'm saying this, because there in the winter, the difference between Alaska, where you've got this a port on the Russian side and a port on the Alaskan side, in the winter, apparently that gap between the two, which is, looks like it's about 50 kilometers, that gap is frozen, that you can walk across the ice from Russia to Alaska, that it's frozen at a certain time of year, that there actually is a land bridge that is made in that way. So I'm trying to look at these directions, but let's just do it in kilometers. Let's just get a measuring lines. We'll just do this key, and we'll go from Tehran and this is 1,000 kilometers. So 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. We're going to have to use the key. 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. So let's try 8,000 miles and let's look it up. 8,000 kilometers. First, let's do kilometers to miles. So 8 kilometers to miles. So how many miles would that be? It'd be 5,000 miles. So how long? And so I went and I did all this, you guys. I know you probably don't believe me, but I went on a walking website and looked up how long does it take to walk 5,000 miles. Okay. Also, Ephraim was rebellious. So what did Yah do to them? Color charge as in past. What Yah do to them? Color change as in past. So is if they were a rebellious people, why were they? Because this is what Ezra says. This is what Second Ezra says, that in when they were in the places where they were in the Magog lands, which ended up to be Magog lands, that they wanted to worship Elohim in truth. This is Ezra. This is not, something that we're guessing about. This is what Ezra said. And so since they wanted to worship Elohim in truth, they wanted to find a land that wasn't full of Gentiles that they could worship according. And so Elohim provided them access to this land by splitting waters and allowing them to walk dry shod like the Israelites did of old through these areas, and provided miracles and wonders along the way so that they could get to this land where no man had ever lived, called Azareth. That was it said maybe. Okay. So this was a a concept that they wanted to go into this land, into Azareth, him helping them along the way. So that's why I'm thinking that Azareth is the United States. And then people have said this for a long time, but I think it's the United States because that 5,000 miles, I think you could walk. So walking time, 5,000 miles. Let's take a look. How long would it take? Okay, 5,000 miles. How long would it take? Okay, walk time calculator. This is what I looked at right here. It says length of the walk in miles, so 5,000. It looks. I've got the last one that I did was 4,300. I guess I came up with 4,300 last time. So total climbing in meters, total descent in meters, total break time in minutes. So break time, I'm guessing per day. Break time would be, okay, if you were going to do in minutes, so you would just say 12 hours. Let's just say you're walking. It says total length of the walk, descent. Okay, walking time is 3 hours, 3 miles per hour. Climbing time is 1 minute so 3 miles an hour is what they're doing. So they're giving you 3 miles an hour. So how would we calculate 3 miles an hour? So it would be 5,000 divided by 3, right? 3 miles an hour, right? So that way we would get the amount of hours it would take to travel 5,000. So let's just do 5,000 divided by 3. Am I right? Am I doing my math right? So 5,000 divided by 3. Okay, so this is weird. You're getting 1,666. That's wild, right? So you're looking at that many hours, that meant 1,666 hours it would take. And let's just say you're walking 8 hours a day. Let's just say you're walking 8 hours a day. So you would take this number divided by 8 to get how many days? 1,666 divided by 8. So it's saying 208. So 208 days walking 3 miles an hour at 8 hours a day to make 5,000 miles. So that's less than a year. That's like three-quarter year. So if you times that by two, you would get you would get that year and a half. So that's walking 1 mile an hour. Walking 1 mile an hour, 8 hours a day would take you 5,000 miles. And it would take you a year and a half. Walking one. This is what we're dealing with. Yeah, 666 is bad. I understand. I'm not going to be superstitious about it because we understand that. That's not the number that we're looking at. The number that we're looking at is how long is it going to take for a group of people to walk 5,000 miles, right? And if they were motivated enough, if there was miracles along the way, is it possible? And this is where the speculation starts because we don't know what Azareth is. We don't know if Azareth is America. We know it takes 1.5 years to get there. We also don't know if these Colchis and these Iberians were Israelites. It looks like they were. We also don't know if it's for such a large group to travel through mountainous area, through snow, through weather change and all of those things, the time that it would take for them to get from Iran to Alaska. Do you see what I'm saying? To Seattle. We don't know if that is even possible, even though in Second Esdras it said that these Israelites would be led by signs and wonders. We don't know if they were led through that direction with signs and wonders. But we can do the math and find out that it's possible, that this is possible. And what they've been trying to do is to say, oh, there were no slave ships, that all of this is another psychological game that they've been playing on people, is that all the reason why we don't have them now, that there's no leftover slave ships, is because they never existed in the first place. And the people that this is a pro-black, black nationalist concept that now that you recognize that you're a Native American, that you should be fighting for America, that America is your land, and that's really the place where you've been given. This is propaganda that's in the media that's based off of a kernel of truth that there were some, and this is, the secondary evidence to this, understanding is that the adversary is using it to try to lure us away from this being a possibility, that even those black Indian tribes that they're identified as being indigenous in America could have been Israelites too. Shoshani reference, even though that's a Persian reference, it would have been a place where these northern Israelites and the southern Israelites too, we know Daniel was there, that would have been a place where they would have been and received a name or received ideas or, even named themselves, hey, we're the Shoshani Israelites. You see what I'm saying? And now here in this new modern context, we're in Azareth, but now it's called America. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And of course, this is all speculative because I don't know. But are there any huge black tribes in the Caucasus right now? Are there any huge black tribes across beyond Babylon right now in those areas? There are none. That the Israelite tribes are black tribes, even though there's a range of from light skin to dark skin, just like our people now. It was mostly dark skin and mostly mid skin. So we're looking at a people that would look like us now. Do you see what I'm saying? And then the numbers from the slave ships, the numbers from the Indians, it kind of makes sense that you would come up with a group of people here in or there in America, centuries later, being a large enough group to be comparable with any other group at 20 million, 15 million, and who knows what the real number of black folks is in America because they like to play those type of games too. But that number, that group, and with that history of some people say, oh, well, my side was part Cherokee. Even the term Cherokee is Haruki. Do you see what I'm saying? That E at the end, designating what people you're from, it is a Hebrew reference, right? If you're Israeli, like they call the Ashkenazi, that E at the end of anything is automatically a Shemitic language pointer. So Cherokee, it being Haruki, means that that's a Semitic style. You know, Shoshani, Semitic style. Tanasi, where we get the name Tennessee from, Shemitic style. You see what I'm saying? We don't know the names of the places where we live now. Alabama, Mississippi in the South, particularly Tennessee. All of these names are names that come from the people that were there before. Alabama. Alabama is a Hebrew word. Uh, Tanasi, Tennessee is a Hebrew word. You see what I'm saying? So Mississippi has the foundational Hebrew structure with the suffix. So we recognize that there is Hebrew culture that is indigenous to America for some reason. So that's another indication that this may be something to look deeper into. And so there was a book. Okay, it says yes, but it says okay. Hold on. Where are their large numbers today? And so that's what I'm saying. Unless we're willing to compromise with the concept of there now being this large group of white-skinned Israelites, then we have to look for them elsewhere. If we're looking in the Caucasus, if we're looking in Asia Minor, if we're looking in China, if we're looking in Russia for the places where these 10 lost tribes could be, that's where the Bible says that they would be, and then beyond that in this other land, then we'd have to find a large black tribe there, and there's none there. There's just large white tribes. The large white tribes all point back to Magog. So unless we're willing to say that one of these tribes that look like it may have been Magog or in Magog lands or is, racially incompatible with what Hebrews have always been, unless we're willing to give that up and say, okay, well, it could be any of these people, then we'd have to look for them somewhere else because where they were 2,000 years ago. That Josephus says that there were a great multitude beyond Euphrates, and they're not there now, unless it's one of these Middle Eastern groups that you know literally point straight back to Magog. Then it has to be still us. Do you see what I'm saying? It has to still be us in America, and not just say, "Oh, well, we're just everything. We're northern and southern Israel. We're every prophecy is talking about us." Not to do that, but there is a pathway to exactly that. That northern and southern Israel were remixed and recongealed together. That even the propaganda is towards that they're telling us that we were both slaves from ships and slaves that were indigenous. That's what the propaganda is even saying right now, not pointing to either place being Israel in origin. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just conjecture for now, but on 10 northern tribe part, it's not conjecture with the southern tribes for sure, but the 10 northern tribes, it's just conjecture, but it's strong though. It's a very, very strong conjecture. Okay, it says, yes, my great grandmother was Cherokee identified. See, this is what I mean, and this is where the the I guess you would say the partition is, because if you are these whiter, lighter skinned tribes, or to one of these nations that are identified in the modern day, then you get reparations. Do you see what I'm saying? You literally get reparations from the land that was taken from you. But if you're associated with one of the darker skinned tribes, if you were removed from that Cherokee concept somewhere in history, then you don't get reparations. You don't get to claim this is your land. And that's a prophecy too, because it's not. Even if Elohim sent you there to be safe for a time, for times, and a dividing of time, now you're not. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, whatever the case was from before, now you're mixed in together. You know, now you're mixed in together as really one people, smaller people groups scattered in far-flung places like Thailand, like I guess you could say Indonesia and all of these places where they have India, where they have a subclass group of black folks that are discriminated against, Afro Mexicans, Afro Iranians, Afro Iraqis, all of the with the of it. Do you see what I'm saying? Afar, of course, is one of Josephus' sons that Africa was named after. So Africa takes on a Semitic name anyway from Abraham. You guys see what I'm saying? We're almost being pointed out, as coming from Abraham's son, unintentionally, as a historical hallmark for something else. You see what I'm saying? And I hate to kind of go off on a rant about this, but it is almost verifiable. Almost. There's some missing pieces here and there, and there is, you know, a leap of faith. I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, it's a huge leap of faith to say that Elohim led the 10 northern tribes through Siberia into Seattle. It sounds ridiculous, but no matter how ridiculous it sounds, when you do the math on it, is it possible to get there physically, walking? Yes, it is. And if you did it at 3 miles an hour a day, three miles an hour per day, with 8 hours a day, it would take you 280 days. And that's what is it? That's 3/4 of a year right there. That's 3/4 of a year. So if you just double that and say, okay, well, you're walking 1.5 miles a day because you're a big, huge group, you can only get that far. It takes you right at 1.5 years. You see what I'm saying? Right at 1.5 years. So I don't know. There are a lot of things pointing in this direction. You guys have any evidence that points in a different direction with a different group of people in another place, then let me know so that I can kind of incorporate, so I can verify it and incorporate it into what I believe, because this is what I believe. I know it's conjecture. I know it's not, as nailed down as I would like it to be, but I believe it. Do you see what I'm saying? There's enough elements there for me to claim it. And so I do claim it. I haven't done a video on it yet. And I don't think I'll do a definitive video on it, but I do believe it. It says Yah did not lead them. They were rebellious. They were rebellious at one point in time. But Second Esdras says that they would desire to worship one place where there were no Gentiles. Now, later on, could they have been led in a different direction? Later on, could they have been influenced by Gentiles later in the places where they ended up? Yeah, for sure. But according to what the prophecy says, that they would desire to return to Elohim's laws and commandments. And in order to do that, they had to move, because there were these infiltrating Gentiles coming in that were going to hinder them from worshiping in the way that they desire to worship. This is coming straight from Second Esdras. It says, yeah, yeah. So at that point in time, then we understand that whatever Ezra is prophesying about, that in that moment, they were obedient. They were at that time period obedient. And you can see how they could be that, being in, being in captivity, isolated for so long. We know that when they were in Israel, they were wholly disobedient, right? We know that we don't get any righteous kings from the northern kingdom, that, that they were wicked out the bat, right? So after going through a history like, could they have learned their lesson? Could they have, you know, you know, maintained a level of obedience? I think it's possible. Could they have lost that in later years? I think that's possible too. I don't see any, and I don't mean to just argue or contend with any other ideas, but I don't see any way around it being this way unless there is some additional information that I'm missing about one of these groups of people that we're talking about. If we have, any history on the Colchis or the Iberians that say that they were not of Israelite origin or did not come from any of those places, then I'd be willing to say, okay, well, yeah, this is incorrect. If we Colchis ended up after this place where they were in this northern area where Tacitus says that they were, then I say, okay, well, yeah, maybe not. This is not the case. If it were too long, if it took too long to get from, Iran, Caucasus to Alaska to North America, then I'd say, okay, yeah, this is because that was the first question I asked myself. I said, if these are the people, then it has to be there has to be a comparable travel time from this place to the next. And if it's like 10,000, 15,000 miles or something like that, where it would be impossible for them to walk this distance in the year and a half that they give us, then okay, I can just scrap this concept and move on to some other research. But it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly. You even give them walking a mile a day, they would make it in that year and a half. They'd make it in that year and a half, in exactly that year and a half. Walking a mile or a mile and a half a day, they would make it. That's, a mile and a half is, up and down the street here. You can jog a mile and a half in 15 minutes, right? That's even long for a mile and a half. So if you're walking that pace, that distance, you'd make it. If you were walking, you know, that mile a day, which I don't think that they were walking a mile a day. They were probably walking 3 miles a day, maybe more, but stopping and resting and wintering in places and moving in other times and faster and slower. So you give them twice the amount of time, and it ends up right at that year and a half. I don't know if that's a coincidence. This is what told me, and I did this research recently within the last few months, within the last 3 months, when I said, let me just calculate the, because I have this in my mind that this is possible, but I haven't actually calculated the walk time. And sure enough, the walk time was in acceptable parameters, and not even just in acceptable parameters, but almost spot on. 5,000 miles, 3 miles a day, 208 days. Times that by a day off every other day, you get one and a half. You take the Sabbath out, you get one and a half. You see what I'm saying? So, with all that being said, I didn't name this video the 10 tribes, but I will name it the 10 tribes. And I guess you can just call this my personal, you know, concept of how the Israelites reunited in America. That's kind of what this is about. And this is kind of what it leads us into for us to kind of halfway understand what Elohim is doing. And, we look in our head and say, okay, 10 northern tribes are gone. So that's a majority of the people of Israel gone. So you claim your Judite heritage, but don't care nothing about the other 10. You see what I'm saying? They could be anywhere doing anything. Wait, they're this tribe in Africa, they're that tribe in Africa. They're here, they're there. And from any different ethnicity, because it doesn't matter, people are mixed up. No, based off what the scripture says, based off what the clues that we have to go by, it appears that those Northern American Indians are Israelites, and not all of them. The ones that have the same racial characteristics as we do now, that we know were separated from their tribes and mixed in together with Judites that came off the ships. You see what I'm saying? Mixed in together with Judites that came off the ships. We all look at ourselves as having some Indian, in our blood. Hey, my mama was part Cherokee. My granddad was part Cherokee. He was from here. He was from there. There's lots of history of Black and Indian relations. You understand what I mean? And we didn't know how, we didn't know how deep that would run, but we've always known it. We've always known it. And my whole going back, all said I'm part Indian or this is Indian. Even in my family, my dad on his mother's side, they claim that there's some Indian there in that side too. So there was one other thing that I wanted to say. Oh, that's what it was. Columbus, right? Columbus, we know, looked at the same book that we're talking about now, Second Esdras, looked at the same information that we're looking at now, the nation of Azareth, the country, the place of Azareth, and said, hey, I should be able to get there moving west, just like the Israelites east. So literally, Christopher Columbus looked at the same thing that we're looking at now, and came up with the same conclusion that hey, if I travel east, I'll run into that place where the Israelites were talking about them going west because they went further to the west to get there because they were closer on that side. But I'm further east. Well, hold on. What am I talking about? East, west. So west, they went further east to get there and traveled across the plain to the east. If I go west, depending on how big the world is, I should be able to reach that same place going west. And he was right. You guys, Christopher looked at the same thing that we're looking at now. He looked at the course of the Israelites going into uncharted territory and went the opposite direction, saying that he should be able to meet where they landed at, going the opposite way, and he was right. He did. He looked at the exact same information that we're looking at now for the exact same reasons because he took with him Hebrew interpreters for the exact same reasons and came up with the same conclusion as we're talking about right now. Yeah. It says only tares and wheat now. And of course, we know that there is, yeah, a great separation that's going to happen between all people. That the calling in of Israel together here in the last days is. And I was, talking to a friend in the faith, and it was an amazing conversation because she's been in the walk for 30 years, 30 plus years. And so she's come across all these little tidbits of information going from Messianic Judaism to understanding that she was a Hebrew herself, and from congregation to congregation trying to find, the perfect fit for her. And, just along the way, from rabbis and teachers and mores and even Christian pastors and all these different people has a, colorful education in scripture. And so from one of her old rabbi buddies from before she recognized that she was an Israelite, when she was still like Jews for Jesus type of thing, what that rabbi told her was that Christianity in itself was a vehicle by which to unite the 10 tribes. This was the real reason. This is what this rabbi who didn't believe in Messiah was saying. He said, and I don't, and he was he did not, he was a Polish Ashkenazi Jew who was like 80, 90 years old and had been in Auschwitz or one of these camps. And so he was a rabbi and was like training her, and she's an Israelite, she's a Hebrew. But before she knew she was a Hebrew, she was recognized that she should be keeping the commandments. So she went under this rabbi, this Ashkenazi rabbi. And his depiction of Christianity, his understanding of what Christianity actually is, was a mechanism or vehicle by which to unite all 12 tribes back together. Interpretation of what Christianity is. That the instruction of Messiah to go to the four corners and teach everybody was gathering the fullness of the Gentiles. That in the distant future, when the message was fully preached, that those who understood the whole message, not just New Testament or Old Testament, that understood the whole message would be both genetically Hebrew in the places that we were scattered, and then cleavers to Elohim and the commandments and to the people. That Christianity, being the ingrafting of the Gentiles, was literally that net that was used to pull everybody back into the truth. And whether or not Christianity is true or not doesn't matter, because the Bible is true. And once people are introduced, even through the falseness of Christianity, to the culture, that eventually the culture would awaken in them, and they would, and then also the Gentiles that were around them that could see the same things that were happening in the text happen to these people where they are, would cleave to Elohim and cleave to the people, and then together all those people would be brought back in under one roof, under one king, under one temple, under one Elohim, under one Mashiach, in one nation. And that's where we're headed now. Because once we are, scripture says that we're dry bones, right? But once we have our flesh and our sinews and the breath of life breathed back into us, then at that an exceeding army that's not just of us, but also now including all these groups of people that recognized us where we were, and then recognized Elohim in us and through us, and then worship the Father through that light shine. And let your light so shine. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay, so we are right at an hour and a half here. So I didn't mean to talk about this so long, but I'm glad we did. And I'm glad I got an opportunity to kind of air this concept out, to air these things out, and to throw some things against the wall and see what sticks and what doesn't stick. And so far, it seems is solid. And so what I like for you guys to do is try to tear it down. Because this is why we have these discussions. Because if this is strong enough to preach, then it also needs to be able to withstand criticism. So if I've missed anything, or if it's anything that I might not have incorporated, any prophecy, or anything that may steer you into another direction, or steer my train of thought in another direction, so that I can go and research it and figure out what, if this is what is true or not. Please let me know, so that we can really get to the root of this, and to the understanding. It says totally unrelated, but I just thought of something based on what you said about the dry bones. Go ahead, my brother. We're here just talking now. Ezekiel 37. It said, I wonder if that's how Bone Thugs and Harmony actually got their name. Of course, since you're from Cincinnati, I know they're from Cleveland, but Bone used to be one of my favorite groups growing up, and I had to recognize later on that they were a satanic group. But they kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things in the music industry through Easy E. And I know this is not on topic here, but Easy E and Jerry Heller and all that. I'm doing my research time ago, and this is before before I recognized the music industry is what it is. That Jerry Heller actually came on. He was doing a radio interview, and he was talking about the things that him and Easy E used to do together to try to get success in the music industry. And he just casually says, yeah, we had these rituals and we did them, and that was just a part of the deal. And me and Easy went from there and started Ruthless Records. And so he just casually mentions, no, because he was talking about, this is what it was. He was talking about Mr. Ouija, the skit on that first Bone album. And I don't want to go into it because it's satanic and evil, but he was asked about it, like, what's up with all this? Is this what you guys were really doing? And he kind of makes light of it. He said, yeah, we were doing these rituals and things. We were trying to get this group off the ground. So me and Easy got together and did some of these things, and then started Ruthless Records. And when he was saying did some of these things, he was literally mentioning the Ouija style rituals that, Bone and them were referencing in these songs. And whether or not Bone was directly involved, I think that they were. I think that they were directly involved because of the satanic imagery and everything around them. Just like 3 6 Mafia. I'm from Tennessee, so it was Bone 3 6. That was it. That's all I listened to, and they were admittedly a satanic cult. You've got that group. You got Lord Infamous that got killed in mysterious ways. You got Gangsta Boo that got killed in mysterious ways, and then all these other people that are just referencing them. Gangsta Boo, and this is another thing that I saw that came out. I was watching an interview on the Breakfast Club, and this is after I recognize now, oh, there is a satanic cult in the industry, and this cult is what kills people. Whether it's Wu-Tang Clan, Return of the 36 Chambers. So this reference, even Wu-Tang Clan is a satanic cult. Look at the name, Killer Priest. You see what I'm saying? These are people that are in a cult, right? So not any kind of cult, it's a satanic cult, clearly behind the scenes. And they had people to die in mysterious ways. ODB. You had another guy that was like tripping off of shrooms or something and was, got killed in some crazy way. Same thing with 3 6. You got their members that are getting killed in these wild ways. And Gangsta Boo was on, what's one? It's not 106 in Park. It's the thing with Charlemagne on there. Uh, what's the Breakfast Club? On the Breakfast Club, and she was in an interview, and they confronted her and about being in this cult, right? They confronted her about being in the cult, and she said is no, well, no, they confronted her about going to church. That's what it was. This was a few years ago, and she was like, well, I started going to church, I wanted to get out of the group. I wanted to start rapping. So I thought about getting back into spirituality and seeing what the church was about. And of course, they're asking her, what, are you a church girl now? And she said, once I got in there, I saw the ritual and I saw all of the you know, the stuff that was going on, and it felt like a cult to me. She said, "This is what she said. Heck, I already got out of a cult. What do I look like jumping into another one?" So I left it alone. I said, "Uh oh." I said, "Uh oh," when she said that, and this was a couple years before she mysteriously died. I said, "Uh oh." She wasn't supposed to say that because no matter what 3 6 did, they were named 3 6 like they were a cult. But they always said, even this is why as a kid I didn't mind listening to them because I'm believing what they're saying. Oh, we're just doing this as like a prank. We're just joking around. This is a stunt to sell records. So I said, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. Da 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 da. I always believed that, even up as far as being grown, until I started understanding scripture. Like these guys were actually a real cult, and that's why there's people dying around them. That's why they're so successful. That's why they got a Grammy for "Whoop That Trick." They got a Grammy for the craziest song in the world because they're part of this cult. And so I said, dang, not only that, they've got to keep it secret because they're not admitting to it. And so when I saw Gangsta Boo admit to be that, like casually admit to, like almost unintentionally admitting to being in the cult, she said, heck, I got out of a cult already, not to jump back into another one. I said, uh-oh, that's the first time I've ever heard 3 6 publicly be mentioned as a cult by one of their members. I said, oh, she's going to be in trouble for that. And then 2 years later, 3 years later, she's dead. Old rap groups are all parts of the cult. That I guess the question was, it says major remnant. Shalom, brother. Okay. 7 churches in Turkey Christianized Russians. It says, wow. I think someone Jewish gave them their name. It says, Bone Thugs and Harmony. Yeah. Yeah, that guy, Jerry Heller. Jerry Heller was a Jew, and he was the one responsible for Eazy-E, responsible for Bone and all those guys. So yeah, absolutely. 7 churches in Turkey Christianized Russians. Yeah. So yeah, the 7 churches in Turkey, they try to make the claim that because they're Orthodox in some of these places that they have ties to ancient history through there. But you're talking about, you know, places where there were large Hebrew groups like Laodicea, Philadelphia, um, what's some of the Ephesus, Sardis, what's some of the other ones? I can't remember any of the other ones off the top of my head, but those churches that are in Asia Minor, you know, which is Turkey, are places where there were, you know, were full of Hebrews that Gog and Magog and, you know, the people of Gog and Magog got rid of in later years. But if that's it, if there's nothing else, I will go ahead and close it down. I appreciate you, 513rd Natty, for coming through. Israelite in Panama, I appreciate you for coming through and checking this out. And then also my brother here, I think he's back up in here. Open up the scroll. I appreciate you too, my brother, for coming out here. We will get back to doing these lives. The next thing I have is a monologue video that I'm doing on Gog and Magog to kind of put a lot of the pieces together in a concise way. Sometimes my videos are too, you know, I guess it's more of an old school style to do the conspiracy video with the clips and all that. They don't get as much attention as they used to. So I was going to do a voiceover on this next one to kind of try to make things a little bit more clear for everybody. But if that's it, if there's no more questions, if there's no more comments, I appreciate you too, my brother. If there's no more comments, I'm going to go ahead and close it down. And we'll just do this, you know, regularly. I used to do this, but I got away from it. We'll do this more regularly. Shalom, shalom, you guys.